And just like that, we are already getting into the trilogy era of League Classic. And yet it is obvious that we are not done yet. So, as Feral Pony promised, after all the hard-hitting feedback which League Classic got, the Classic team formed up their plan, and 2 days later, they replied. As a quick catch-up, while not going through everything that happened. In short, the biggest issue that Classic had was that it wasn't faithful towards the Classic visuals. And so after people launched PvE and jumped into a Classic game, they were met with 90% of all the lobbies being filled with VGU versions of the champions. Which is something nobody really wanted. Tied to this, another issue was the fact that the Classic appearances of the champions had to be unlocked with tokens, and there happened to be a cap on how many tokens you can actually earn. And lastly, the third issue are the modern skins, which, yes, those are still in the game, so they will haunt us for a little bit longer. And so now, let's have a look at what the team cooked up. So, since this isn't a big dev drop, which we would usually see on YouTube, it was only dropped on Riot's social media. And as a fun fact, this video was prepared, recorded and edited in a single day. That sounds like my life. And it all goes through Feral Pony, the director of League Classic. And even though we could already feel this before, from how quick this reply was, you can tell the League Classic team actually cares. Which is why, after thanking us for all the feedback, he dives right into the biggest problem. The Classic skins, and he had a very straightforward way of saying it.
Feedback received.
Yup, the team definitely knows. And yes, that is the reason why, even before this update dropped, on PvE, Riot already unlocked all the Classic appearances for all the champions. Meaning that you will not have to use tokens to unlock these. But doesn't that mean that everyone still has to manually choose the Classic appearance at the beginning of the game? Well, no! And that is where the team went a step beyond what I thought they would do. So now, not only are all the base Classic skins unlocked, but they also become the default skin that is selected. And on top of this, they are completely replacing the VGU versions of all the champions. Meaning that the modern default skins are just annihilated, and they will no longer be an option. On top of which, there are still more champions who still have the VGU versions, so slowly but surely, Riot will be re-adding in all the old appearances. But now you may be thinking, well, since the VGUs are going away, will the modern skins go away too? Well, no. These are staying. For now, at least. We'll talk about them later. Anyway, already, the team managed to fix one of the biggest problems that League Classic had. So we are already going in an awesome new direction. Next, they also heard the feedback about voice lines. I mean, having Sion scream out his new lines is not as cool as him joking about getting into the chopper. And so they confirmed that they will be re-adding in as many old voice lines as possible. However, it was confirmed that there will be some technical difficulties with these. Which is why some of the voice lines will be added in soon and some will come a little bit later. Now, in the previous video, I already mentioned that voice lines are kind of a hellscape, but Freak actually gave us more info for why the voice lines are complicated. He mentioned that there is a big problem with how the voice lines are localized. The old system was set up in a way where voice lines could have a different numbers of them for different languages. The new voice line system is a lot simpler, but it needs to run with the fact that all the voice lines have the same number of them in every language. Now, since this is something that the old voice lines just don't have, Riot has to manually rewire the lines to be set in whatever context they are supposed to be set, and that is for every champion and for every language of that champion. So on paper, it is not a complex task, Riot can do it. But it takes time to do it manually, which is why it's gonna take them some time. But the key part is, they will do it. So next, Feral Pony also addressed the question, why aren't they locking into a specific patch? And what is really the point to the best of old patches approach? And for the most part, he re-explained what I mentioned in one of the previous videos. They always knew roughly what the gap would be. 2009 would be too old, and Season 6, for example, would be too new to be classic. But even before they ran into this conclusion, they ran a lot of surveys, with the questions being, what is too old? What is the new? And what is the best version of classic? And it happened to be that people simply replied the exact same thing. League felt classic when they started playing, it was too old before that, and it was the best the year after they started. But then there were also other people who replied that they were interested in classic because they wanted to experience what didn't exist in the game anymore. And the reason why this is important is because this is what drives the majority of all the other classic games that exist. For example, classic WoW is driven by two kinds of people. The people who like the nostalgia of the old things, and the people who never experienced it and they wanted to experience it now. That is actually the reason why that game blew up. And so League is trying to do the same thing. However, if League wants to do this, they can't just focus on a single patch. And that is because, as we mentioned previously, in the first few years, League changed a lot. And so, if you, let's say, focus on Season 3 because you think that one is classic, you are already removing a lot of the classic spells, Heart of Gold didn't even exist, and a lot of the champion kits are a lot more modern than you remember. And so Feral Pony confirms that they couldn't have just locked into a single patch. Because fundamentally, the majority of the players would not get what they actually want, which is to experience all those awesome classic things. No, in order to actually do that, they would have to take these things from the patches where those things existed. And that's why we have the best of all approach. However, even after they set this as their goal, they got the feedback, they listened to it, and they took it seriously. And so now they are shifting their way forward, meaning that they will focus on making the game even older than what they originally planned. And so a lot of the content that made it into the game that came from Season 5 will actually get pulled out. Yes, they are actually removing things based on our feedback. This level of game iteration, on this scale, is not something we are used to from the League team, so big props to the Classic team here. And so yes, the team will be refocusing on making their original cutoff real, which was Season 3. With that said, he also confirmed that when it comes to Season 4 editions, there will be some exceptions. They may include some of them, but only if they actually are a good change for the game that still stays within the spirit of Classic. For example, the Baron buff that buffs minions was actually a Season 4 change. But because it doesn't really break the Classic experience, it may be allowed to stay in. However, because it is technically a mechanic that is new for the Classic philosophy, they can let it stay, but they will tune it down so that it is not a superpower from the future. Now, for context, the reason why you would want the modern buff in the game is simply because you want the Baron buff to help people close the game. And let me tell you, with the old Baron, people didn't do that, which is why the games took a lot longer. And so even though we all love Classic, 55-minute games on average might still be too brutal. But next, they also dive into the topic of usability and game clarity. Here they also talk about what we previously mentioned in the video, where we talked about all the changes that are actually fine for the game. For example, this is where we talk about the modern ping system, which is technically just a different form of communication. And since this is something that people are already used to using with the modern hotkeys, if they removed it or even changed it, people who hop between modern and classic would be confused very quickly. So it is simpler to just leave it in the game, especially since it doesn't affect gameplay. With that said, going into the future, I would appreciate it if Riot gave it more classic visuals, but I'm not sure if that's possible because it is hardwired into the modern League. Also, another point of discussion, which I didn't actually notice myself, in fact, it was all the people who watched MSI who talked about it, was the bounty system. And so Riot confirmed that the bounty system in League Classic is actually the classic version of it. The only thing they added is the little visual that now shows you how much gold the champions are worth. And finally, Feral Pony then dives into champion design. And here again, I can't believe how fast they are with the changes. And so first, he quickly reassured us that the League Classic team loves the old kits with all the jank. And for League Classic specifically, they tried to find the best version of the champions from the first 5 seasons. But again, after the feedback they received, they will be refocusing on the first 3 seasons instead. This goes for all the champions that are yet to be added too. So think about how many times Mordekaiser was reworked too. If you're thinking about controlling Dragon, well, that is way too new. Anyway, now they will be picking the best version of every champion from the first 3 seasons. And as an example, we got Twisted Fate. They could have picked Season 3 of TF, which is pretty much the exact same as the modern version, but to make him stand out, they actually picked the one with the global teleport at level 1. But then there is also someone like Katarina. For her, they tried to do the same thing. But it turns out, most people don't remember Katarina as the Season 1 version. No, most people remember her having the W as the active AoE damage ability. And so, since most people prefer the 2012 version of Katarina, which, funnily enough, Feral Pony worked on, the team already replaced her kit to match that version. Yes, I can't believe how fast they are. Now, to expand on this, Feral Pony added that they do not plan on rewinding the kits that much. Most of the kits already feel classic the way people likely want them. And they don't really want to shove the classic kits through the voting system because there is a good chance people will troll in those. And for the most part, that would be it for the video. But thankfully, from Twitter we got more information that we can dive into. For example, there is one more champion that might potentially get a change, which is Singed. After Minish Cap's feedback, Riot will try and do something with Singed's interaction with the poison and last-hitting minions. That is something that the modern version of Singed does. But Feral Pony mentioned that this one might be hard to remove because it is wired into the modern version of Singed. So they will try, but that one is not guaranteed. And for the most part, that's it. And so, from the small reply that we got from the team, they managed to fix a lot of the big problems. But the boogeyman still lives on. Yes, modern skins are still part of the game. And I wonder if this is the case because the team first wants to do iterative changes. For example, they first want to give everyone the default classic looks, they want to see how people react to that. And then, if people still give the same feedback about the skins, they will look into that one next. That is how you would usually approach these changes. Which means there is only one path forward. You keep giving them feedback. I still believe that removing the modern skins entirely is the correct move, but that would also mean that the team would have to work hard on the classic skins, because porting those over is still a hassle. But who knows, maybe the team already knows about this, maybe they are already trying to figure it out, and maybe the stainless version of classic is still on the horizon. But for now, rest easy. Because the modern Nunu can't scare you anymore.